You don't attract what you want. You attract what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you quietly accept as normal. And that's why so many people feel cursed. They want wealth, but their daily choices are built for survival. They want real love, but their nervous system is trained for chaos. They want peace, but their mind is addicted to pressure. So the universe doesn't ignore them. It simply reflects them, not their wishes, not their vision board, not their affirmations whispered in the dark, their identity, because life is not a catalogue where you order outcomes. Life is a mirror that answers one question with brutal honesty. Who are you being when no one is watching? That's the part most people avoid. They try to manifest a new life while living in the same inner state. They try to paste positive thoughts on top of an exhausted character, like expensive wallpaper on a cracked wall. And the cracks always win. Tonight, we're not here to chase results. We're here to change the source. Because the fastest way to change your life is not to want more. It's to become different. To become someone whose standards are higher than their moods. Someone whose habits don't collapse when motivation disappears. Someone who can hold wealth without leaking it. Hold love without sabotaging it. Hold peace without needing the world to be perfect. This is the truth that ends the struggle. Your life is not punishing you. It's revealing you. Every reaction you repeat is a signature. Every belief you entertain is a blueprint. Every private thought you return to is a vote for the person you're becoming. And the world is simply electing that person into reality. So, if you've been asking, why isn't it working while you keep calling the same problems back into your life? The answer is not out there. It's in the pattern. Because you don't attract what you want. You attract who you are. And when you change who you are, the world has no choice but to change what it gives you. Take a breath and listen carefully. Because in the next part, we're going to expose the invisible magnet you've been carrying your entire life. The identity you keep broadcasting, and the exact way to rebuild it so your results stop feeling like a fight and start feeling like gravity. There is an invisible force shaping your life right now. Not luck, not fate, not the economy, not other people. It's something closer than all of that. It's the version of you that wakes up every morning and quietly decides what is normal. Normal effort, normal treatment, normal income, normal love, normal stress. You call it personality. Psychologists call it conditioning. Spiritual teachers call it vibration. But at its core, it is your identity. And identity is not what you say about yourself. It is what you repeatedly allow. The life you're living right now is not a random event. It is the natural habitat of your current identity. Just like a fish cannot live in the desert, and a cactus cannot survive in the ocean. Your life conditions match the environment your identity can survive in. This is why sudden success feels uncomfortable to some people. This is why healthy love feels boring to others. This is why peace feels strange to someone used to chaos. Because your identity is a magnet, but not for what you want. For what feels familiar. You say you want financial freedom. But does your identity feel safe with money? Or does it secretly believe money disappears? That opportunities are rare? That people like me always struggle? You say You want a deep, secure relationship. But does your identity feel safe with calm love? Or does it only recognize intensity, uncertainty, emotional roller coasters? You say you want confidence, but does your identity know how to hold attention, take up space, be seen without shrinking? The magnet does not respond to your goals. It responds to your self-image. And self-image is built in silence. It is built in tiny, private moments no one else sees. When you break promises to yourself, when you tolerate disrespect, when you choose comfort over growth, when you say it's fine while something inside you tightens. Each of those moments is a vote for the identity that says, this is what I accept. This is what I deserve. This is who I am. And the world listens. Not emotionally, not morally, mechanically. Life organizes itself around what you consistently demonstrate you can hold. Think about temperature. If you set a thermostat to 20 degrees, the system will adjust to keep it there. Too hot, it cools. Too cold, it heats. Your identity works the same way. You have an internal set point for success, love, happiness, and peace. If something enters your life above that level, more money, better treatment, bigger opportunity, but your identity is set lower, you will unconsciously lower your life back down through procrastination, self-sabotage, overthinking, choosing the wrong people, delaying decisions, creating drama, not because you're broken, because your system is trying to return to normal. This is why people win the lottery and lose everything. Why someone leaves a toxic relationship only to enter another. Why motivation surges, then disappears. The identity magnet pulls you back to what matches your self-concept. You don't fall to your goals. You fall to your identity. But here is the part that changes everything. Identity is not permanent. It is programmed through repetition, which means it can be rewritten the same way. Not with one big moment, with small, consistent evidence. Your identity updates based on proof, not affirmations, not fantasies. Proof. When you say you will wake up early and you do, identity shifts. When you choose to speak calmly instead of react, identity shifts. When you say no to what drains you, identity shifts. When you follow through even when you don't feel like it, identity shifts. Each action whispers a new message to your subconscious. This is who we are now. And slowly, the thermostat changes. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that don't fit yet. You act confident, but inside you feel unsure. You set boundaries, but guilt rises. You stay disciplined, but your mind complains. That discomfort is not failure. It is identity stretching. Most people stop here. They interpret discomfort as this isn't me. But the truth is, that's the old identity trying to survive. The old version of you has momentum, habits, emotional patterns, comfort zones. It will try to pull you back. But if you hold the new standard long enough, the magnet resets. And once it resets, you don't chase better results. Better results feel normal. Discipline stops feeling like force. Confidence stops feeling like performance. Healthy love stops feeling suspicious. Money stops feeling fragile. Because your identity now matches what you once had to fight for. This is the invisible shift behind every overnight success. From the outside, it looks sudden. From the inside, it was thousands of tiny identity upgrades no one saw. So the real question is not, what do I want my life to look like? The real question is, who would I have to become for that life to feel natural? Because the moment it feels natural, the magnet locks in. And life begins to respond to you not as a struggler trying to escape, but as a person whose inner standard has already changed. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover the biggest illusion that keeps people from ever changing that identity. The belief that positive thinking alone can override a weak foundation, and why that belief keeps millions stuck while they swear they are doing the work. Most people are not failing because they are negative. They are failing because they are surface-level positive. They repeat affirmations. They visualize success. They say, I am abundant, I am confident, I am worthy. But when life tests them, their reactions tell the truth. Because thoughts you say do not override thoughts you live. You can whisper, money flows to me. But if a small expense creates panic, your nervous system is voting for scarcity. You can affirm, I deserve love. But if you over-explain yourself, tolerate disrespect, or chase approval, your behavior is broadcasting unworthiness. You can declare, I am calm. But if traffic, delays, or criticism hijack your mood, your system is trained for agitation. This is where most self-help stops. It teaches people to decorate the mind without rebuilding the foundation. It's like painting over a wall that's already cracked. For a moment, it looks new, but pressure returns, and the cracks show again. Because identity is not built from what you imagine occasionally. It is built from what you practice daily. Positive thinking can inspire you. It can remind you. It can point you toward who you want to become. But it cannot compete with your habits. Your habits are louder than your affirmations. Your reactions are louder than your vision board. Your standards are louder than your intentions. If someone disrespects you and you laugh it off while feeling small inside, your identity just updated to, this is acceptable. If you say you want growth but avoid uncomfortable conversations, your identity updates to comfort is more important than expansion. If you say you want success but scroll, delay, and wait to feel ready, your identity updates to I act based on mood, not commitment. And life responds accordingly, not to what you hope, but to what you prove. This is why people feel betrayed by manifestation teachings. They did the rituals. They said the words. They tried to feel the emotions. But they didn't change their behavioral evidence. And identity only changes through evidence. Imagine trying to convince someone you are strong while refusing to lift anything heavy. No matter how confidently you speak, reality will not agree. Your subconscious mind works the same way. It does not believe your words. It believes your patterns. Every time you follow through when it's inconvenient, you deposit proof. Every time you hold a boundary, even when it feels awkward, you deposit proof. Every time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you deposit proof. And proof rewrites identity. This is why a single disciplined action can be more powerful than an hour of positive thinking. Because action tells the system, we are this kind of person now. The problem is not that people think positively. The problem is that they think positively while continuing to live the same way. They want abundance, but spend emotionally. They want respect, but avoid confrontation. They want peace, but stay in environments that drain them. So they experience a strange inner conflict. Their mind is trying to move forward. Their identity is holding the brakes. And that friction feels like life is hard. But it's not life fighting you. It's your old identity trying to survive. Change threatens it. Because if you truly became disciplined, the version of you that lives on impulse would disappear. If you truly became confident, the version of you that hides would lose its role. If you truly became self-respecting, the version of you that accepts less would no longer belong. Identity change is a form of internal death, and the mind resists death even when it's the death of limitation. So it creates excuses. I'll start tomorrow. I'm just tired. It's not the right time. This is just who I am. Not because you're lazy, because your system wants to stay consistent. But consistency is not loyalty to your past. It is loyalty to who you are choosing to become. Positive thinking without behavioral change creates frustration. Behavioral change aligned with intentional thought creates transformation. That's the formula. Not think, receive, but think, act, repeat, become. Once becoming happens, receiving becomes natural. You don't force new outcomes. You support them, because your character can now hold them. This is why people who suddenly change seem different in every area. They didn't change their goals. They changed their standards. They stopped asking, "How do I get this?" and started asking, "What would someone who naturally has this do right now?" That question bridges the gap between dreaming and becoming. It pulls identity forward. So instead of trying to convince yourself you're already successful, prove it in small ways. Show up on time. Keep one promise. Finish one task you usually delay. Speak one truth you usually swallow. These are not small acts. They are identity upgrades. And in the next chapter, you'll see exactly how these tiny choices compound, how one thought, repeated enough, turns into a habit, a trait, a personality, and eventually your destiny. Nothing in your life changes in a single moment. It changes in a chain, a quiet, invisible sequence that runs beneath every result you see. Thought, pattern, habit, trait, character, destiny. Most people only notice the last link, the job, the breakup, the opportunity, the failure, the success. But destiny is not created at the end. It is formed at the beginning in the thoughts you allow to repeat. A single thought seems harmless. I'll do it later. It's not a big deal. They probably don't care. I'm just bad at this. Alone. It looks small, temporary, insignificant. But a thought is never alone. The mind is built for repetition. What you think once under emotion, you are likely to think again in a similar moment. And repetition creates patterns. If every time something feels uncomfortable you think, "I'll avoid it," that becomes a mental pattern. If every time you make a mistake you think, "I'm not good enough," that becomes a pattern. If every time something goes wrong you think, "Why does this always happen to me?" that becomes a pattern. Patterns feel like personality, but they are just practiced thoughts. And patterns, when repeated long enough, become habits. A habit is just a thought that moved into behavior. "I'll do it later" becomes procrastination. "I'm not good enough" becomes playing small. "They don't care" becomes emotional distance. "This always happens to me" becomes victim behavior. Now it's no longer in your head. It's in your actions. And actions are loud. You don't say you avoid hard conversations, your silence does. You don't announce, you doubt yourself, your hesitation shows it. You don't declare you fear failure, your delay reveals it. Habits, when reinforced, turn into traits. A trait is what people begin to expect from you. She's always late. He never finishes what he starts. They're dramatic. He's reliable. She's calm under pressure. Traits are patterns with history. They are habits that have been repeated so often they feel like identity. And traits, when stabilized, form character. Character is not what you do once. It is what you do when no one is reminding you. It is what you default to. Your character is the collection of traits you no longer have to think about. That's why character feels real. Because it's automated. You don't decide to be impatient. Impatience fires automatically. You don't choose to stay disciplined. Discipline fires automatically. And here is the part most people miss. Your destiny does not respond to your wishes. It responds to your automatic self. Opportunities don't land based on what you want. They land based on who you are without effort. If your automatic self avoids responsibility, you will unconsciously avoid opportunities that demand it. If your automatic self doubts success, you will unconsciously sabotage momentum. If your automatic self tolerates disrespect, you will unconsciously stay in environments that shrink you. Because destiny is simply character expressed over time. And character is just repeated thoughts made solid. Think about a river carving through rock. One drop of water does nothing, but constant flow shapes mountains. Your repeated thoughts are that water. Your mind is the current. Your life is the landscape being shaped. You don't wake up one day with a bad life. You wake up inside the structure your repeated thoughts have built. That's why small changes feel powerless. Because they don't see the chain. They think it's just one skipped workout. It's just one ignored boundary. It's just one lie to myself. But one thought starts the chain. And chains, left unchecked, build futures. The good news, the chain works both ways. One disciplined thought, repeated, becomes momentum. Momentum becomes habit. Habit becomes reliability. Reliability becomes trust. Trust becomes opportunity. One calm thought repeated becomes emotional stability. Stability becomes wise reactions. Wise reactions become healthy relationships. Healthy relationships become a peaceful life. Nothing mystical, just accumulation. This is why transformation looks slow until it looks sudden. People think success happens overnight. It doesn't. The chain was building long before results appeared. Quietly, privately, in moments when no one was watching. Every time someone chose the harder right instead of the easier escape, a link strengthened. Every time they acted aligned with who they wanted to become, Even when they didn't feel like it, the chain pulled them forward. And eventually, destiny had no choice, because destiny cannot resist a solid character. It simply unfolds from it. So, when you feel stuck, don't ask, "Why isn't my life changing?" Ask what thought keeps starting the wrong chain. And when you want a different future, don't chase the last link. Change the first one, because the thought you repeat today is the destiny you meet tomorrow. And in the next chapter, you'll discover the dangerous illusion that traps people in this chain. The trap of becoming a righteous dreamer who thinks beautifully, but lives unchanged. There is a trap more dangerous than negative thinking. It doesn't look like failure. It doesn't feel like ignorance. And it doesn't sound limiting. It sounds evolved. This is the trap of the righteous dreamer. The person who thinks beautifully. They consume powerful ideas. They understand deep concepts. They speak the language of growth, healing, abundance, awareness. They can explain the law, quote the teachers, describe the future version of themselves in perfect detail. But their daily behavior stays the same. They visualize courage and still avoid the conversation. They meditate on discipline and still delay the work. They affirm abundance and still make choices from fear. This creates a dangerous inner illusion, because the mind begins to confuse knowing with being. The righteous dreamer feels like they are growing because their ideas are growing. But identity does not change from ideas. It changes from alignment. And alignment requires action. This is why the righteous dreamer is often more frustrated than the uninformed person, because they can see who they could be. They feel the gap. They feel the potential. They feel the truth. But they don't cross the bridge. And that gap becomes pain, a quiet suffering. The suffering of almost disciplined, almost confident, almost healed, almost free. The righteous dreamer tells themselves, "I'm working on it internally." But life doesn't respond to internal monologues. It responds to demonstrated character. A thought without action does not build identity. It weakens it. Because every time you think a noble thought and then act in contradiction to it, you teach your system a dangerous lesson. My words don't mean anything. My intentions are optional. My identity is flexible when it's uncomfortable. Over time, this erodes self-trust. And without self-trust, confidence collapses. This is why some people feel spiritually informed but personally powerless. They've trained their mind to imagine a higher self while training their behavior to obey comfort. And the subconscious notices. The subconscious does not respond to inspiration. It responds to consistency. It doesn't ask, "What do you believe?" It asks, "What do you do when it costs you something?" That's where identity is revealed. This is what James Allen warned about. A good thought, if not united with good action, becomes poison. Not because the thought is wrong, but because it creates self-deception. The righteous dreamer lives in a beautiful inner world while their outer life stays small. And the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to act, because action now threatens the fantasy. Action would force the dream to become real or collapse. So the dream is protected, delayed, refined, intellectualized, anything but embodied. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Life rewards the person who takes imperfect action with ordinary thoughts over the person who thinks extraordinary thoughts and does nothing. Because reality moves with momentum, not imagination. You don't become confident by thinking confident thoughts. You become confident by acting before confidence arrives. You don't become disciplined by admiring discipline. You become disciplined by doing the thing you said you would do when your emotions vote no. You don't become healed by understanding your wounds. You become healed by responding differently when those wounds are triggered. This is where the righteous dreamer resists most, because this is where comfort ends. Identity change always demands friction, and friction feels like danger to the nervous system. So the mind creates clever defenses. I'm not ready yet. I need to learn more. I'll act when I feel aligned. I just need clarity. But clarity comes from movement, not waiting. Waiting keeps the old identity alive. Movement starves it. This is why people binge content but feel stuck. They are feeding the mind and starving the character. Growth without embodiment is entertainment. Transformation requires participation. The moment you act even clumsily, the righteous dreamer dissolves. Because action exposes truth. You learn what you really believe by what you're willing to do. And this is where the chain reverses. One aligned action creates self-respect. Self-respect creates courage. Courage creates momentum. Momentum creates identity. Identity creates destiny. The righteous dreamer waits to feel like the person. The builder acts until they become the person. That is the difference. And in the next chapter, we'll move from illusion to mechanism. You'll see how your life acts as a pattern detector. Why you keep meeting the same situations in different forms. And how identity quietly filters what you can even see. Because once you understand that, you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking the question that actually changes everything. Most people believe life is happening to them. Random events, bad luck, difficult people, unfair circumstances. But life is not random. It is a pattern detector. And your identity decides what patterns you see. Choose and repeat. Imagine two people walking into the same room. One is insecure. One is self-assured. Nothing in the room changes. But their experiences are completely different. The insecure person scans for threat. Who looks better? Who might judge me? Where could I be embarrassed? The confident person scans for opportunity. Who can I connect with? What can I learn? How can I contribute? Same room, different filters. Your identity is that filter. It decides what your mind highlights and what it ignores. If your identity is built around rejection, you notice delayed replies, neutral faces, small changes in tone. Your mind says, see, something is wrong. If your identity is built around worthiness, you notice warmth, shared laughter, eye contact, openness. Your mind says, see, this feels good. Nothing outside changed. But the pattern your mind detects did. And once you detect a pattern, you start behaving in ways that confirm it. This is how identity becomes self-fulfilling. The person who expects rejection becomes guarded. Guarded behavior feels distant. Distance creates disconnect. Disconnect leads to rejection. and they say, "This always happens to me." The person who expects respect sets boundaries calmly. Boundaries filter out the wrong people. The right people stay. Healthy dynamics form, and they say, "I don't know why, but I always meet good people." It's not magic. It's selection. Your identity is not just attracting situations. It is selecting from reality. Reality offers millions of possibilities every day. Your identity chooses which ones you step into. Think about money. Opportunities are everywhere. Ideas, skills, connections, risks. But someone with a scarcity identity notices obstacles first. Too risky. I'm not ready. What if I fail? That's not for people like me. So they pass. The opportunity moves to someone else whose identity is built around growth and possibility. That person sees the same situation and thinks, "Maybe. Let's try. I'll figure it out." Different pattern detection. Different life path. This is why two people can hear the same advice, and one changes while the other stays stuck. One identity hears, "That's for me." The other hears, "That won't work for me." Identity edits reality before you even respond to it. You don't see life as it is. You see life as you are. And because your brain wants consistency, it looks for evidence to confirm your existing identity. This is called confirmation bias. But in daily life, it feels like truth. If you believe people are unreliable, your mind collects proof. If you believe growth is possible, your mind collects proof. If you believe you're unlucky, your mind filters for loss. If you believe you're capable, your mind filters for openings. The pattern you look for becomes the pattern you live. This is why people say, "I keep ending up in the same situation, just with different faces," because the faces are not the pattern. The identity behind your choices is. The job changes. The partner changes. The city changes. But your reactions, standards, and tolerances stay the same. So, life reshuffles the cast but keeps the script. And until identity changes, the script repeats. Not to punish you, to match you. Your identity is like a radio frequency. You tune to a certain signal, and that's the station you hear. There are countless other signals in the air, but your receiver locks into the one that matches its setting. You don't hear the others. You don't notice the different possibilities, not because they aren't there, because you're not tuned to them. Change the frequency, and the station changes. Change the identity, and the life experience shifts. This is why forcing external change rarely lasts. You can push yourself into a new environment, a new relationship, a new level of income. But if your identity is tuned to the old pattern, your perception will recreate it. You'll find problems, create tension, lower standards. Pull yourself back, because the system wants coherence. Your outer life and inner identity must match. The only lasting way to break a pattern is to upgrade the identity that detects it. When your identity shifts, your perception shifts. You start noticing different people, different openings, different responses inside yourself. And suddenly, life feels different. Not because the world changed, because you're seeing a different layer of it. This is the moment people call luck, alignment, or flow. But it's simply this: your inner standard rose, and your pattern detector adjusted. So instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening?" ask the question that leads to power. What part of my identity keeps choosing this pattern? Because once you change that, the script rewrites itself. And in the next chapter, you'll learn how one single character trait, a keystone trait, can shift your entire identity system and pull multiple patterns upward at once. You do not rebuild your entire identity at once. You don't wake up one morning and become disciplined, confident, calm, courageous, focused, and emotionally free altogether. That is how people burn out. That is how change collapses. Real transformation begins with one trait, one central quality that, once strengthened, supports everything else. This is the keystone trait. In architecture, the keystone is the single stone at the top of an arch. Remove it, and the entire structure collapses. Place it correctly, and the whole structure holds. Your identity works the same way. There is one trait that, if fully developed, would quietly improve every area of your life. For some people, it's discipline. For others, it's emotional stability. For others, it's self-respect. For others, development. The mistake most people make is trying to fix every weakness at once. They want better sleep, better focus, better communication, better fitness, better confidence. So they scatter their effort. A little motivation here, a little inspiration there, a new habit for 3 days. Then exhaustion. Nothing sticks. Because identity change requires repetition, and repetition requires focus. When energy is divided, identity stays the same. But when you choose one keystone trait, something powerful happens. Your effort stops being scattered. It becomes directional. Let's say your keystone trait is discipline. Not extreme discipline. Just the ability to do what you said you would do, especially when you don't feel like it. At first, it shows up in small things. You get out of bed when the alarm rings. You finish tasks before starting new ones. You stop when it's time to stop. These look like tiny behaviors. But internally, something much bigger is happening. Each time you act with discipline, your identity updates. I am someone who follows through. That identity shift spills into other areas. You begin trusting yourself more. Self-trust creates confidence. Confidence makes communication clearer. Clear communication improves relationships. Better relationships reduce stress. Reduced stress improves emotional stability. All from one trait. The same works if your keystone trait is emotional stability. You focus on responding, not reacting. You pause before speaking. You breathe before assuming. You observe feelings without obeying them. This changes your interactions. Fewer conflicts. Clearer thinking. Better decisions. Better decisions lead to better outcomes. Better outcomes increase confidence. Confidence increases courage. Courage opens opportunities. One trait. Multiple effects. The keystone trait works because identity is interconnected. Traits are not isolated. They form a system, strengthen the center, and the structure lifts. But the keystone trait must be chosen honestly, not based on what sounds impressive, based on what would remove the biggest bottleneck in your life. Ask yourself, what is the one quality that, if I truly embodied it, would change everything? The answer often feels uncomfortable because it points to responsibility. You already know. The place you avoid is usually the place your keystone trait lives. Once chosen, the rule is simple. You do not think about the trait. You practice it daily. Every day, you look for moments where this trait can be expressed. If it's courage, you say the thing you usually swallow. If it's discipline, you act before you feel ready. If it's self-respect, you stop tolerating what drains you. If it's emotional control, you respond instead of react. At first, it feels unnatural because identity resists replacement. The old self wants comfort. The new self wants growth. There will be friction, but friction means change is happening. Most people quit here. They interpret discomfort as this isn't me. But that's exactly the point. You are becoming someone new. And the old identity will try to pull you back through thoughts like, this is too hard. Just this once. It doesn't matter. You're overdoing it. These are not facts. They are the voice of your previous self trying to survive. The moment you act anyway, the keystone strengthens, and something subtle shifts. You begin to feel different, not excited, not hyped, stable, solid, because identity is no longer an idea. It is becoming evidence. Once the keystone trait stabilizes, you don't force other traits. They rise naturally. Discipline supports confidence. Confidence supports boundaries. Boundaries support peace. Peace supports clarity. Clarity supports wise action. This is why real change feels quiet. No dramatic explosion. No sudden personality switch. Just a steady rise in inner standard. And as that standard rises, your tolerance lowers. You stop tolerating things that don't match who you are becoming. Your environment shifts. Your choices shift. Your results shift. Not because you chased them, because your identity reorganized. And in the next chapter, you'll learn the missing link that locks this in, how thought must unite with action, and why, without action, identity never truly changes. A thought alone is a direction. An action alone is a movement. But when thought and action unite, they become identity. This is the point where transformation stops being theoretical and starts becoming real. You do not become a disciplined person by admiring discipline. You become disciplined the moment you close the laptop when you said you would, even though you want to keep scrolling. You do not become confident by repeating, I am confident. You become confident the moment you speak while your voice shakes, instead of waiting to feel ready. This is the line most people never cross. They live in the space between understanding and embodiment. They think the right thoughts. They feel inspired. They promise themselves change. But when the moment of action arrives, they hesitate. And hesitation preserves the old identity. Because identity is not built from what you agree with. It is built from what you demonstrate under pressure. Every day, life gives you small identity tests, tiny moments that look insignificant. The alarm rings. Do you get up or negotiate? Someone disrespects your time. Do you set a boundary or stay silent? A task feels uncomfortable. Do you start or delay? These moments don't look like destiny, but they are, because they are identity votes. Every time thought and action match, a message is sent to your subconscious. This is who we are now. That message matters more than motivation, more than emotion, more than intention, because the subconscious learns through repetition of behavior. If you think, I want to be calm, but react with frustration, your system records frustration. If you think, I respect myself, but accept what drains you, your system records self-betrayal, and identity stays the same. But if you think, I will respond calmly, and you pause before speaking, your system records emotional control, and identity begins to shift. This is why the smallest aligned action is powerful. It closes the gap between the person you imagine and the person you are proving. Without action, thoughts remain wishes. With action, thoughts become evidence, and identity is built from evidence. Imagine trying to convince a child that fire is hot without letting them feel heat. Words alone would not create understanding. Experience would. Your subconscious works the same way. It does not update from theory. It updates from lived proof. This is why people who take small, consistent action change faster than those who wait for big motivation. Action creates momentum. Momentum reduces resistance. Reduced resistance makes action easier. Soon, what once felt forced starts to feel natural. That is identity forming. At first, you are acting against the old self. You wake up early, even though you want to stay in bed. You speak up, even though silence feels safer. You stay focused, even though distraction calls. This stage feels like effort. But effort is not a sign of misalignment. It is a sign of transition. You are moving from one identity to another. And movement always requires energy. The key is not intensity. It is consistency. One aligned action repeated daily is more powerful than one dramatic change that fades. Because identity forms through pattern. Close the laptop on time for a week, discipline begins. Speak honestly in small moments for a week, confidence begins. Pause before reacting for a week, emotional control begins. Each action strengthens a neural pathway. Each repetition makes the next choice easier. This is how identity becomes automatic. At some point, you no longer fight yourself. You no longer debate with your emotions. You simply act in alignment. Not because you forced yourself, because that is now who you are. This is the quiet shift behind every personal breakthrough. People say, you've changed. But what really happened is thought and action stayed aligned long enough for identity to reset. The danger comes when thought and action separate. When you think high-level thoughts but act in low-level habits. This creates inner conflict. You know what to do, but you don't do it. And that gap erodes self-trust. You start doubting yourself. not because you lack ability, but because your system has learned that your words don't lead to behavior. Rebuilding self-trust begins with small alignment. Say less. Do more. Make fewer promises. Keep all of them, even if they are small. Because every kept promise tells your mind, we are reliable. And reliability is the foundation of confidence. You cannot feel confident if you don't trust yourself. You cannot trust yourself if your actions contradict your intentions. So, identity change is simple, but not easy. Choose the thought that reflects who you want to become. Then take the action that proves it. Every time, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because discomfort is the doorway. Comfort maintains the old self. Discomfort builds the new one. The person you want to become is on the other side of the actions you keep postponing. And once you walk through that door enough times, something shifts. You stop asking, how do I change my life? Because life begins changing automatically, not through force, not through constant motivation, but through the quiet authority of a new identity formed, where thought and action finally became one. And in the next chapter, you will discover where identity is truly tested in the moments no one sees, where private character determines public destiny. There is a version of you the world sees, and there is a version of you that exists when no one is watching. The world responds to the second one, not the performance, not the image, not the personality you present in public, but the private character you practice in silence. Because public behavior is occasional. Private behavior is repetitive, and identity is built from what you repeat. Anyone can act disciplined when observed. Anyone can appear calm in controlled environments. Anyone can sound confident when the stakes are low. But who are you when the room is empty? When there is no applause, no accountability, no reward? That is where your real identity lives. The habits you allow when you are tired. The thoughts you entertain when you are alone. The standards you keep when no one would know if you lowered them. These are the invisible bricks of character, and they determine what you can hold when pressure arrives. This is why people can maintain an image for years and collapse in one moment. Because image is external. Character is internal. Image can be managed. Character is revealed. A person may appear confident in meetings but doubt themselves in private. They may speak about discipline but break promises when no one sees. They may preach calm but spiral internally at night. And when life brings real challenge, loss, pressure, conflict, responsibility, the private self steps forward. Not the persona, the one trained in secret. This is why outcomes feel unfair to some people. They say, I did everything right. But what they mean is, I did everything visible right. Life doesn't evaluate visibility. It responds to consistency. The person who builds discipline privately moves with strength publicly. The person who practices honesty privately radiates trust publicly. The person who trains calm privately handles storms publicly. Private character is the root. Public results are the fruit. You can polish fruit, but you cannot fake roots. This is also where self-respect is formed. Self-respect is not built from praise. It is built from private integrity. When you keep your word to yourself, even when breaking it would be easy, you send a powerful message inward, I can trust me. That trust becomes stability. Stability becomes confidence. Confidence becomes presence. And presence changes how the world treats you. Not because you demanded it, because you embody it. Private character determines what you tolerate. If you allow shortcuts when alone, you will accept compromise when pressured. If you let your mind wander into negativity in silence, you will struggle to stay steady in chaos. If you speak harshly to yourself in private, you will shrink in public. The way you treat yourself when no one sees sets the standard for how life treats you. Because identity listens to repetition, not reputation. And private repetition is constant. This is where identity solidifies. You cannot outgrow the standards you keep in secret. You cannot hold a powerful life with a careless private self. But the opposite is also true. When you strengthen private character, public life stabilizes. You don't need to force respect. You stop tolerating what disrespects you. You don't chase confidence. You act in ways that make doubt lose authority. You don't perform discipline. You become someone who simply follows through. And this is invisible at first. No applause, no recognition, just quiet consistency. But over time, the effects are undeniable. Opportunities feel different. Decisions feel clearer. Reactions feel calmer. Because your foundation is solid. Life can only place weight on what can hold it. Private character increases your capacity. The world does not give you more than you can manage. It matches what you are ready to sustain. If you want a stronger life, build a stronger private self. Choose the right thought when alone. Take the right action when unnoticed. Keep the promise even when it doesn't matter to anyone else. Because it matters to identity. And identity is the invisible architect of destiny. Most people work on their image. Few work on their private character. But private character is where real power grows. It is where integrity forms, where resilience is built, where calm becomes natural. And when pressure comes, because it always does, you will not rely on performance. You will rely on who you have become in the quiet. That is the strength that cannot be shaken. And in the next chapter, you will learn how to let go of what weakens that character, not through force, but through a process of selective demolition, removing the patterns that no longer belong, so something stronger can take their place. Most people try to change by attacking themselves. They fight their fear, shame their laziness, criticize their emotions, and declare war on every habit they dislike. At first, this feels powerful. It feels like effort. It feels like control. But over time, it becomes exhausting. Because what you fight stays in focus. And whatever stays in focus continues to live in your identity. You cannot build a new self while constantly staring at the old one. This is where selective demolition comes in. Not destruction fueled by frustration, but conscious removal guided by intention. When architects renovate a structure, they don't swing wildly at every wall. They study the foundation. They identify which beams are weak, which supports are outdated, which structures no longer match the design they are creating. Then they remove only what cannot remain. Everything else is reinforced. Your character evolves the same way. You don't eliminate insecurity by arguing with yourself all day about being insecure. You don't end procrastination by repeating, "I have to stop procrastinating." You don't dissolve fear by obsessing over how afraid you feel. That only feeds the identity you are trying to outgrow. Attention is nourishment. Whatever receives, it grows roots. Instead, you shift your focus from what must go to what must grow. If you want to remove avoidance, you cultivate courage. If you want to remove chaos, you cultivate structure. If you want to remove self-doubt, you cultivate evidence of capability. The old patterns are not forced out. They become irrelevant. They lose oxygen because something stronger is taking their place. Imagine a garden overrun with weeds. You could spend every day pulling weeds, inspecting soil for tiny roots, worrying about new weeds appearing. Or you could plant dense, thriving flowers that spread across the ground, covering space, drinking sunlight, claiming the soil. Eventually, the weeds have nowhere left to grow. This is selective demolition through replacement, not resistance. Identity changes through dominance of pattern, not through elimination of memory. You may still remember how you used to think. You may still feel the echo of old emotions. But if you no longer act from those patterns, they lose authority. They become history, not identity. The mistake people make is believing they must feel completely different before behaving differently. But emotion follows repetition of behavior, not the other way around. This means you don't wait until fear disappears to act bravely. You act bravely until fear loses its influence. You don't wait to feel confident before speaking clearly. You speak clearly until confidence becomes familiar. Each time you act from the new pattern, you weaken the old structure without fighting it directly. There is also compassion in this process. You are not rejecting your past self. You are not labeling parts of you as enemies. Those habits once served a purpose. Avoidance may have protected you from rejection. Overthinking may have felt like safety. People-pleasing may have been a survival strategy. But what once protected you may now limit you. Selective demolition acknowledges that you are no longer who you were when those patterns formed. Growth is not betrayal. It is evolution. However, there will be discomfort. When old habits lose influence, your system interprets it as instability. Familiarity feels safe. Even when it hurts you, new patterns feel uncertain, even when they serve you. This is why resistance arises. Thoughts like, "This isn't me," or "This feels forced," appear. But that discomfort is simply the sound of identity shifting. Momentum resists change of direction, but once redirected, it builds power. Think of a train switching tracks. The initial shift is loud, heavy, and tense. But once the wheels align, movement becomes smooth again. Your mind works the same way. At first, choosing differently requires attention. You must pause, notice, and respond intentionally. But after repetition, the new pattern becomes automatic, and effort decreases. Selective demolition requires awareness. You must notice which thoughts, behaviors, and standards no longer belong in the structure you are building. Maybe you no longer allow self-talk that insults you. Maybe you no longer accept relationships that drain you. Maybe you no longer entertain the story that you are incapable. Each time you refuse the old pattern and choose the new one, you are removing a weak beam and replacing it with a stronger support. Over time, the architecture changes. Your reactions soften. Your decisions sharpen. Your tolerance lowers for what diminishes you. You begin to feel different. Not because you forced transformation, but because the foundation shifted. This is sustainable change. Not dramatic, not explosive, but steady, stable, and rooted. Eventually, you look back and realize the old habits feel distant. The behaviors that once controlled you now feel foreign, not because you destroyed them in anger, but because you built something stronger in their place. This is how identity evolves, not through self-attack, but through self-construction, not by fighting the past, but by feeding the future, not through force, but through repetition of better choices. And when enough new patterns dominate, the life built upon them changes too, because the structure underneath it is no longer the same. There comes a moment in every real transformation when wanting loses its power. The endless cycle of hoping, wishing, visualizing, and waiting begins to feel hollow, not because your desires disappear, but because you finally understand something deeper. Life does not respond to what you want. It responds to who you are becoming. Wanting is outward. Becoming is inward. Wanting chases. Becoming builds. Wanting says, one day. Becoming says, now. In this moment. Through this choice. This is where struggle begins to dissolve. Because struggle is often the friction between the life you desire and the identity you still carry. When identity changes, that friction fades, not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer divided inside. Your thoughts, actions, and standards start moving in the same direction. That internal unity is power. You stop negotiating with yourself about small things. You stop saying you value growth, but choosing comfort. You stop declaring self-respect while accepting what drains you. The gap between what you believe and how you behave begins to close. And as that gap closes, something subtle but profound happens. You start trusting yourself. Self-trust is the hidden foundation of confidence. Not loud confidence. Not performative confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that does not need to prove itself. Because it has evidence. Evidence built from kept promises. Evidence built from hard conversations faced. Evidence built from moments when you acted in alignment even when it was uncomfortable. Becoming is built from these moments. It rarely looks dramatic. There is no music, no announcement, no visible milestone. Instead, it feels like stability growing beneath your feet. The things that once triggered you do not shake you the same way. The temptations that once pulled you lose their grip. The situations that once confused you become clearer. You are not forcing yourself to be different. You are simply being different. And life begins to reorganize around that new identity. Relationships shift. Opportunities feel more visible. Decisions become easier. This is not coincidence. It is alignment. When your internal standards rise, your external environment starts matching them. Not instantly, but steadily. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "Who am I being in this moment?" That question gives you back control, because it places the power of change where it has always been, inside your daily choices. Becoming is not about perfection. It is about direction. Every day, you will still feel resistance. Emotions will still fluctuate. Doubt will still whisper. But now you have a reference point. You know the kind of person you are building. And when old habits try to pull you back, you notice it sooner. You correct sooner. You recover sooner. This shortens the distance between mistake and alignment. That is growth. The old version of you operated on mood. The new version operates on standard. Mood changes. Standards remain. And when standards guide your actions, identity becomes stable. Stability creates momentum. Momentum reduces effort. What once required discipline now feels natural. This is the quiet moment when becoming locks in. You realize you no longer need to convince yourself. You no longer need constant motivation. You no longer depend on inspiration. Your identity is doing the work for you. The person you have built is now capable of living the life you once struggled to create. You still have goals. You still stretch yourself. But you no longer feel like an outsider chasing a different life. You feel like someone growing into a larger version of your own. That is the end of chasing and the beginning of embodying. So the most important question is no longer, "What do I want next?" It becomes, "Who am I practicing being today?" Because each day is a rehearsal. Each choice is a vote. Each action is a brick. You are always building identity, whether consciously or not. Now you build on purpose. Choose one trait that represents the person you are becoming. Live it daily, not in grand gestures, but in ordinary moments. When tired, when stressed, when tempted to fall back, these are the moments where identity is forged. You do not need to see immediate external results. The real shift happens inside first. A sense of self-respect, a sense of inner authority, a sense that you are no longer drifting, but directing. That inner shift is the true reward. Because once identity changes, outcomes follow naturally. Life reflects who you are with remarkable precision. And when you become someone who can hold more responsibility, more peace, more love, more success, life meets you there. This is becoming, not a destination, a daily construction, a lifelong practice of aligning thought, action, and standard. The person you are building is your greatest creation, and the life you desire is simply the shadow cast by that identity. You've just walked through a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You don't attract what you want. You attract who you are. And now you see what that really means. Your life is not random. It is not punishment. It is not luck deciding your fate. It is a reflection, a mirror of your standards, your habits, your private thoughts, your repeated reactions, not to shame you, but to empower you. Because if your life reflects who you've been, it can also reflect who you choose to become. That is the power in your hands right now. You don't have to change everything overnight. You don't need a dramatic reinvention. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to choose one trait. One. The trait that, if it were truly yours, would shift everything. Maybe it's discipline. Maybe it's self-respect. Maybe it's emotional control. Maybe it's courage. For the next 7 days, live it on purpose. Every day. Find at least 3 moments small. Real moments where you think and act as that person would. When it's uncomfortable, when it's inconvenient, when the old version of you wants to step in, that's where identity changes. Not in motivation, in decision. And watch what happens inside you first. A quiet strength, a growing self-trust, a feeling that you are no longer waiting for life to change because you are. That inner shift is the beginning of everything. If this message resonated with you, stay with us. This channel is not about quick fixes or surface motivation. It's about deep identity work, the kind that changes your life from the inside out. Slowly, powerfully, permanently. Subscribe and continue this journey of becoming. Because the life you want isn't something you chase. It's something you grow into. One thought, one action, one standard at a time.